just for the audience to know, Randy had some sound issues, but he is trying to get them fixed now, so I'm sure he will be here in a moment. Basically, the title of this session is called the Inkjet Journey. I can't even remember the full name of the session, even though I invented it myself. Isn't that bad? The Inkjet Journey and the Future. Because in the session so far, we have been focusing a lot on what is actually currently available. And so some of the questions I think some PSPs and converters may consider these days is it time now to jump in and be part of the Inkjet journey, or is it further down the road? And of course, it could be interesting to talk to somebody who has really hands-on with the development of technology, where the future may be. I know that we will not talk products and we'll not talk about things like that, but it could be interesting to have an understanding whether what is the limitations? Is it speed? Is it quality? Is it diversity in applications, diversity in the papers, and all these kind of things? Some of the things that we have already touched upon these past 2 days, right?
So I think his session, yes, once we get him back on track, he's definitely going to give us a good insight of where he sees things. And looking at where it's come from, I think, yeah, there we go. Hang on. We got him.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My apologies.
Can you turn on the camera as well, Randy? It's just up next to the microphone in the green.
Yeah, I'm trying. I've got hang on a second here.
Yeah.
There we go.
But I'm actually glad that you had technical issues, because if you had been on the session for the past 3 minutes, you would have been blushing, because because Jean and I, we just appraised you so much because of your history and with Kodak and with all the beautiful and wonderful things that you have been involved with. But instead of just taking our words from it, could you just start telling a little bit who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yes, well, first, thank you very much. It's a very humbling experience to be invited to such a interview and to talk about the career at Kodak and what Kodak has done in Inkjet. So thank you both very much. And again, my apologies for not being technical astute to get the microphone and speakers working on time.
Hopefully better.
You can't be good at everything, and Randy, you change the world when it comes to inkjet technology. You can't be great at everything, I always say.
So my background is really at engineering. I started working at Kodak many years ago, actually back in 1982, as an engineer, actually as a co-op. I was still in college at the time, and so it was a real privilege to begin to really embark on a technical career with Kodak and the history of innovation that Kodak's had, and started designing and developing printheads in the labs with the other engineers, and really through that time period, worked on some early inkjet development where the resolutions were very low at 120 dpi. Eventually moved into the full engineering role and progressed into manufacturing and operations, and kind of took the products from the beginning of the life cycle through the whole life cycle. Spent a lot of time traveling and helping customers integrate technology, and really a new technology, into their application spaces, and how they could use that inkjet to really grow their businesses, and had a lot of fun and a lot of learnings with customers, because it's really not until the customer gets the product that you start really understanding what they're going to do with the product and how they see the product. You see it as you design it, but the customer sees it a little different. And so that was a very enjoyable experience. And then in 2004, I was honored to be asked to take over the role to lead the Kodak's R&D team on commercial inkjet. And I began that in 2004, and we integrated the technology of Stream into Prosper and developed the systems for roll-fed commercial print. And since took on a role as the president of the commercial inkjet business for a little while. And now with the new structure and new things that we have going at Kodak, we've put everything together and really integrated our print team, and really starting to get back to one Kodak and really serving our customers with a full array of solutions and focusing on our customer rather than just as divisions. And so now I'm leading really the digital print group, but it's just a responsibility of overseeing the operations of digital print. It's really not a division. We're really focused on all of Kodak and a full solution and suite of solutions for our customers. And so I head up that digital print group that involves the toner, electrophotographic business with NextPress, and then all the commercial inkjet business as well. So there's a short history of my background.
Okay.
I can't help think about, because without any relation whatsoever, you said just before that when the customer starts to use the machine and you actually see that what you were sitting and engineering, how it was actually turned into something useful. I can, as a little anecdote, I can tell you that I made an interview with Alain Barcheny just a year ago, and in that interview he said we never envisioned that an indigo machine would print balloons. So I take that it's a similar kind of experience, that sometimes when you create a printing device, that suddenly you see it be used for completely new applications and things that you never even thought of, right?
Absolutely. And the customers, they like to run it the way they want to run it for their application. And we were, I remember one of the initial customers was NTT, who was the largest telecom company in the world. And I was spent a lot of time over there when we were integrating our Kodak technology into their transaction printing lines. And they had a way they wanted to run it, and we kept trying to tell them to run it a different way. Eventually I caught on, and they knew how to run it, and they were extremely successful, and ended up being one of our best performers and one of our best clients. But we had to let them really, run it the way they felt and the way they see fit. So.
But that often happens, doesn't it? Because at the end of the day, those operators and those people that are sitting with that product every day, all day, almost push the boundaries. They don't tell you about it because then the service contract falls away, but
exactly.
They push the boundaries.
They run it more than we do, so they end up learning better. So.
Randy, when we asked you to participate, I know that you don't participate in many sessions, and I also know that you are a private person in many ways. So first of all, of course, I appreciate your time here, and also Jill, your colleague from the UK, asked to say, okay, what kind of topics would we like to talk about? Because tomorrow we obviously have Patty and Jennifer from Kodak talking about all your new equipment. So that is of course one side to it. Some of the things that we would like to talk to you about is also, a tiny little bit about the history, a tiny little bit about the present. And then it could be funny to have like a helicopter view and say, okay, where will this technology bring us? Because as I said, when you were just fixing the sound, and then Gene and I spoke about, some of when you started with the Versaprint and the transactional printers, that served a specific market, right? Then the equipment developed into better and higher quality, and now it started to serve a broader market. But now we're talking about that the inkjet technology is so mature that we're now talking literally about technology that is replacing some of the analog and some of the legacy hardware and printing methods, right? Or what do you think?
So I missed the last part.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the quality and the speed and the technical things that we see with inkjet now, for the first time, we are now talking about technology that is so matured that it can actually replace some of the legacy production equipment like Flexo and Offset to some extent, right?
Yeah. Yes, we go back and look. You had in some of your questions that you sent. We really, you ask about some of the challenges of inkjet and the evolution of what it took. And it really takes, we focus on one or two things, but to me, it really focuses on a full solution. When you look back at the 120 DPI technologies that were back in the 1980s, they ran for a purpose and they were dye-based inks. They ran on uncoated papers. They ran at high speeds. But they didn't have the quality levels that you really needed to do the things that we were doing now. And that evolved when we moved into transaction printing with higher resolution and really be able to, Kodak brought the first, roll-fed color system into transaction. And what it did was, really kind of changed not just the efficiency of the market, moving away from offset printed shells, but also it changed the advent of transpromo, right? It was like a one technology invention brought on another invention in terms of application spaces. And so the quality level there, and also, focused more on substrates. It really began to develop into an ink substrate, media interaction. The quality levels had to be better. Even though you had higher resolution, you still couldn't print on some of the substrates effectively with quality. And people, I think, sometimes confuse resolution with quality. And there's no doubt there's a strong interaction between the two. However, you also have to look at the other aspects of quality when you think of print density, you think of edge definition, highlights, you think of coalescence, material ink sets. So many aspects go into the level of quality. And I think that really came out in the transaction market, where the focus became about medias and ink interaction and developing of the papers that needed to be there for the substrates. And Kodak led the way with many of the paper companies to develop the papers that are currently used in transaction. So with the deep knowledge of material science, we're really blessed to have brought that forward in the inkjet print side of what Kodak had historically around material science. And so we're continuing to develop that now as we move into the commercial and packaging application space.
When you look at and you talk about, for example, the material science, and when you talk about the low resolution and the speed and all those things that you just mentioned, how much of that was because this was really groundbreaking new technology, and how much was due to speed from computers and accessibility to also the processing of data and things like that?
Yeah, good question. We only, I would say it's more of the innovation of the technology around material science and substrates. And obviously you had to, the silicon, the ability to get to higher resolution was important. And, that's been progressing in all technologies now with inkjet. Yep. But really, we only ran into an issue at one point when we were doing IPDS at very high speeds, where we were actually working side by side with Intel, waiting to get their latest Pentium chip so that we could get a controller fast enough to do IPDS.
Please give us some CPU, right?
Yeah. So once that we kind of got through that era, I think the technology from controllers, digital front ends have really been able to keep pace pretty well. And now, you can really scale your, the fact that you can add multiple processors just really makes the scalability of the data path even, much stronger and much faster. So, but the really, it's material science of ink and paper. I always get back to when people ask me, well, why can't we do something? We were being asked to print on garments back in the 1980s. We were printing ties at one point, trying to break into these new application spaces, but the inks weren't there to do that, right? We even at one time, one of our print heads was doing 3D printing back in 1993 with our printers. So before it's amazing what people were trying to do with inkjet, printed circuit boards. We had a team that did printed circuit boards back in the late 1980s. So really, but it was the advent of the material science later on as we progressed that I think opened the doors to where we are today, where we really see more mainstream printing. And a lot of that I think has been led by the ingenuity of many scientists around the world, and a big part of that as well with Kodak. So it really opens the doors. And now we got the future with packaging and even harder substrates to print on.
So Randy, have Kodak, and I probably know the answer, so I'm just, for the audience sake possibly, have Kodak always manufactured their own inks? That's a big part of your business now. And has that always been the case?
Yes, we've always manufactured our own inks, both the dye-based inks that were, a lot of them were developed out of the commercial inkjet business early on. But Kodak has also worked in the area of nanoparticulate pigments, which started about 25 to 30 years ago. And that was in wide format and other types of drop-on-demand devices, including our own desktop inkjet printer. And those inks and dispersions and pigments, the nanoparticulate pigments that we were doing, are all leveraged into the ink sets that we have today, which I think makes some of the best inks in the world. And the ability for us to really manufacture those efficiently and with some level of scale, enables us to keep those inks lower cost, as well as they're water-based. We've been very focused with our strategy is around water-based inks. We believe that, we also got to get into the substrate, the quality, the speed, but now you got to get into the economics, what the customer can afford. And one of the you brought it up, Morten, in your letter to me, that one of the things is transitioning more and more offset pages or analog pages to digital. And when can that happen? Well, it has to happen when you have the quality, you have the productivity, You have the the substrate range, but you have to have the economics. And in today's world, the other area that we're very focused on is sustainability. And water-based inks bring environmentally friendly ink sets. They're lower cost because they're water-based. And they also start opening the door into packaging when you get into indirect food contact. That's hard to get with solvent inks and many of the other inks that are used to print and packaging applications. But water-based inks open those doors up. Personal care, where you can have skin contact, is another area where we've developed inks that allow that. And that's all, I think, really, a lot of it's based off the fact that we use water-based inks, and it helps complete that whole solution set that you need from productivity, quality, economics, sustainability. All those things come together, and that will help transition more and more, analog pages to digital.
If we look at the present market situation, I mean, because when Kodak was, you were to many, I think, a front runner in the inkjet industry, and you were, it was not a very dense market at that time. I mean, the competitive situation was completely different than today. Without going into any details about any brands, I take that you pay a lot of interest to also your competitors in the market right now. So if you, I couldn't help, because yesterday we spoke about that. If you look at, for example, at Lars Drupa, Benny Lander, he said, and in his presentations, he said that who dares to invest in inkjet technology when nanography is just around the corner? And I think that what happened, I don't know if it's because of that, but apparently that kick-started everybody to move ahead with doing faster presses, higher quality, higher diversity on substrates and things like that. So if you look at the competitive field right now, what is your opinion about quality, speed, and where we are today in broad terms?
It's a great question. And just to kind of step back in the transaction space, when Kodak entered the roll-fed transaction space, and we were really the only player at that time around 1999 and 2000, it took a good 4 to 6 to 8 years before what you're doing, what you're investing in. And in the area of inkjet, one of the things that becomes very important is to go back to substrates. I sound like a broken record, but when you're the only one doing the printing, the paper mills are all under a lot of pressure today, and you need the volumes to put on the paper mills. You'll hear probably some of this from Jen Pennington tomorrow, but without the volumes, the paper mills won't produce the papers that you need. One of the things that happened in the transactional space is as more and more people entered, more and more paper companies got interested in inkjet treated papers to bring the cost down. And we're seeing that in the commercial side as well. Different ways to go after the substrate, whether it's pre-coat or whether it's papers that were developed. We developed a paper with a paper company when we launched Prosper for a glossy substrate that was inkjet compatible and optimized. When we see the competitors today, I see it as certainly they're formidable competitors, and they're great competitors, and they all have great technologies. What I look at is really the strengths and weaknesses of the technologies. And from a Kodak perspective, we feel that some of the things that we're developing around inks, but also around the technologies for productivity, for reliability and performance, uptime, the ability to really print in a true production environment where you have to print 12 hours straight or 24 hours straight. Some of our customers literally run our presses 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Yeah. And so we look at that robustness of the technology that we're developing with continuous inkjet stream and Ultrastream, because we want to be in that production environment where we have harsh temperatures, you have dirty environments, and you need to run the machines for a significant period of time. I think when you look at some of the other competitors, certainly have great technologies. We've developed drop-on-demand presses ourselves, but I think they fit in a little bit different place. They're not as high a productivity, and so we kind of look at the strength and weaknesses of where we think we can play and where we can take the technologies we have to our advantage.
But Kodak have always focused on the higher volume kind of sites, correct? I mean, when it comes to printheads, running on a newspaper on wet presses, and if you look at just the production sites, I mean, you've got huge volume sites. So very much that's always been Kodak's focus is high volume.
Exactly, Jean. And when you look at a couple of years ago, there was a study done where we looked at our market share. We had a lower level of market share, but we had 20-some% of the page volume. because we were doing the high volume pages. And so when you really look today, you know, even as we talk about so many competitors in inkjet and how it's progressed, and it certainly has, and it's very exciting where it's at today. But when you really look at the pages that are printed digitally, you know, only 1 to 2% of the pages are still printed digitally in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about the volume of print that's out there that can still be converted from analog to digital, it's a staggering number. And so we still believe that there's this a really long there are a longer transition to migrate those pages from analog to digital. And if you've got a press that can do the higher volumes, then you're going to be able to capture more of those pages. And so that's really been our focus with the technologies that we develop.
But I can't help think about, because I mean, whenever you have a technology and you think about where it how I mean, if you have 99, 98% that could some portion of it could be converted. I take that you also look into what kind of obstacles do you have in order not to get that volume right away. And one of the things is, of course, the cost of ink, for example, right? But also, I think that if you look at, for example, the commercial print space, I maybe not from a page count view, but from a number of different applications, the sheet-based, offset-based printing machines are very diverse, because you have the B1 or the B2 or the B3 format, and it fits into, you have binding equipment and it worked for you for ages. And if you change that into, let's say, a roll-based inkjet system, you basically have to change everything in how you operate, right?
Yeah, and we don't really, you know, what we find in the market is you'll move some people from roll fed to sheet fed, or from sheet fed to roll fed, but really the printers who do sheet fed are going to stay sheet fed, and the printers who do roll fed like to stay roll fed. It's just like some who do roll fed like to finish inline, and others like to finish offline, and they don't really like to change the way they do their work, and they shouldn't have to. So certainly when we look at the application spaces around cut sheet inkjet, I think that's a very big opportunity for the inkjet market. And when you look at packaging and you start talking about the B1 presses, types of application spaces for folded cartons, certainly those are really wide open from my view, that we have yet to really penetrate those as an inkjet technology, and we have a lot of opportunities. Those are all about those printed pages that we talk about, whether they're flexo, gravure, or offset plates, right? They're all it's all open to transition at some given cost, and obviously, and at some performance level.
But it's almost like the market's driving it anyway. I mean, today today our session was on packaging and labels, and just the market and the end user, let's call it the brands, it's actually pushing it all towards that. COVID is helping inkjet, if you ask me. I think it's the best thing that ever happened to inkjet, sadly, but it's true. Because I think it's just given it that urge where people want personalization. People are, want more things that are relevant to them. So, there's just so many things that are changing that. So, as you were saying, correct.
Yeah, what we're seeing, pandemics tend to accelerate transitions sometimes, and I think will be interesting as we look at what's going on. And it was already the retail applications, and what we're seeing is the brands getting more involved, because they're losing. I don't know if they're losing, but they're trying now to really get a more one-to-one communication with the consumer. And so when you think about inkjet, or you're thinking about digital technologies, they're able to do that better. We've got a number of promos that are going with a customer of ours that is a converter in the folded carton space, and the types of things that the brands are doing to really engage with the consumer are pretty amazing. They're driving that conversion. The other thing we're seeing is when we kind of talked, you mentioned a little bit about new technologies kind of interrupting where inkjet's going. And certainly when you look at things like e-readers and publishing, there's been significant impact, although they still coexist with newspapers and books with e-readers, printed pages. But when you look at some of the things that are going on with the internet, we're seeing that there's really a complementary aspect of the internet when you go out online shopping and what you're looking for to produce. The retailers know what you're trying to do, and then they turn around and create direct mail or advertising that they can send to your house that's printed. but it's related to what you've been looking at on the internet. And so we're seeing it kind of complementary to some of those new technologies are complementary to where we're going with digital in the printed space. So,
I mean, the omni-channel has definitely paved its way. I can't help thinking, you probably know the marketing cartoonist, right? That little strip, comic strip, and I can't help because we used that in a couple of sessions in the past session, because there was a guy. He woke up in the morning. He heard the radio about a pair of shoes, and then he was outdoor and he saw a pair of shoes, and then he went to the office and he saw on his social media there was a pair of shoes, and then he went home, there was a television about a pair of shoes, and then he went on Facebook, there was a pair of shoes, and then he bought it directly from Facebook. And the marketing managers next morning said, hey, we have to get rid of outdoor print, television, radio, because that doesn't work. People buy it from Facebook. And I just think it's a wonderful story, because, I mean, basically how we consume and how we're getting advertised are depending on situations. Yesterday, we had a session with a very nice lady, Isla Monroe, who spoke about how direct marketing in a physical print actually owns you a longer time than if you look at something that is electronic, right? And that is, I think this is water on the printing industry's mills, if we understand how to capture and take advantage of that, right?
I think, I think that's one of the big challenges, because throughout these sessions, I think we're still missing the boat in a lot of ways to get the message out to brand owners. Inkjet's, to me, one of the best kept secrets. We are not screaming it enough out there. We are not showing all these brands about what the capabilities are. And I think there's still such a huge opportunity.
But Jean, maybe this is because if you look at it also, as we have been talking about, maybe it's because people don't really diversify whether it's toner or inkjet. They talk more about it as it is a personalized thing. And that means that if you look at the electronic devices, is that it is already personalized. You get e-communication that is tailored. And maybe marketeers to some extent just take that for granted. And that is the challenge, that we have technology where the opportunities are there. So maybe we should less advocate the technology and more the output of what it can give brands. Yeah. Randy, if we take a deep dive into the future, 20 years from now, will we still see analog equipment at that time, you think?
Well, it's a great question, Morten. I tend to believe that the life cycle of print is going to be long, and I still believe that you're going to, in areas especially of packaging, there will be long run packages that I think the economics will still work for Flexo or Gravure. I also think that offset will continue to be there for a long time, because I just think there's certain again, strengths and weaknesses of technology, and there are strengths of offset. When we look at our customers, we sell plates. We tend to look at how do we complement the customer and bring him the right solution. It's not whether we bring him a toner solution or an inkjet solution or a plate solution. It's really what's the customer needs and how do we serve him best with the solution. And it could be all three of the above. So I do believe when you look further out that there will still be inkjet and a toner and offset will likely have some complements to each other. Certainly, some will have begin to take over maybe the larger volume of print over time. I think inkjet's positioned to do that very well, but I don't know that I would say that I see conventional print going away.
But Randy, I can't help think about, if I should tease you a little bit, this is maybe where you have the corporate hat on, because I know that your heart is an inkjet heart. So you have to just talk about inkjet, not about the plates and the toner device. We don't care about those today. No. I also think when I spoke to Bob Leahy from Keypoint Intelligence 2 years ago, and as he said, it's still like, as you also said in the beginning, it's a fraction of the market that is still printed and digital. And of course, if you have like long runs and you have packaging that doesn't need anything, or if you have magazines that are not needed to be individualized, why should you then move to digital? I mean, nobody moves to a new technology platform just for the sake of it, right?
Right, and yeah, exactly. And that's what we're really seeing today in the market the amortization of large capital presses is done. Their print costs are basically just the running cost, the inks and the plates. And as you know, even with digital coming on very strong, the offset market has gotten very efficient in terms of setting up presses. Right, that time it takes to get the presses set up, they've really done a lot in terms of automation there and setup times down, and it made the presses more competitive. And customers aren't just going to walk away from that because there's a new invention. They're going to do what makes them money, right?
But let me ask.
Market,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry,
no, I'm saying it's really a price-sensitive market. So, when it comes to customers, they look at the price, and it's really got to be justified, because if offset's going to be the cheaper option, of course they're going to go there.
But let me ask you another question then that is a little bit fun. If you were a owner of a printing company, Randy, and you have your good old modern, freshly 106 whatever brand machine and you have a depreciation time of, let's say, 8-10 years, and now in 8-10 years it's the next year is running out. You're paid for it, it's depreciated. So will you invest in another analog machine, or will you then invest in a digital machine?
Yeah, I think that's the great question, Morten, and I think that's what we're hearing from customers. Sometimes they're saying, we won't be investing in another analog press, right? They're saying, digital's coming of an age where we think digital is the future, and so they're buying their last press today, when they think the thought process that it will last 20 or 25 years, right? But certainly, I think you're right that's where I think the market is headed. It's a question of that timing and how long it takes.
But there might be something else to consider in this equation, and maybe you agree, disagree. But when I talk to people these days, it's also like that the digital companies seem to have a different customer mindset compared to some of the old ones. Not that they are bad in any customer. That's not what I'm talking about. But the fact that maybe equipment, both digital and analog, a couple of years ago was an acquisition. Today, it's maybe more a partnership where you develop your services together in order for the vendor to benefit from the technology and the development of further technology, but also being part of that value chain for the PSP.
Yeah, I would agree. We're seeing that. I mean, we're really, it's really an adoption, right? We're still in an early adoption phase, I think, in a number of applications with Inkjet, and the customers, are looking for us to help them in that transition and that adoption, and we're becoming a more integral part of their everyday business. And that's why, a lot of our efforts in the last few years have been really more focused on customer and customer needs. But they appreciate the fact that we're in there looking at their total workflow around their plant, and what can we do to help them improve that, and how we can be a part of that solution. So I agree. It is a different, it's a little different approach, I think, that as when you have a technology like offset that's so mature, and now you have something new, people are still looking for how to take advantage. As we mentioned earlier, just because I have a new technology, it's just the beginning. Now people decide, how do I invent or become innovative with that new technology? And
I think that's, and people are also changing their focus, because obviously, I think especially on your side, you've got huge presses with huge volume, but there's not necessarily enough to just do publishing. So what else can I do with this press? So they're almost going then into where they were publishing, printing, publishing, and now they're looking at direct mail, and it's almost out of their comfort zone. They have to think of new ideas, and they're relying on you to hold their hand through the process. So it's changing.
Yeah, we're seeing customers today that are transaction customers who are looking to migrate into commercial print. Very much what you're saying. Looking at new ways they can enter into the print market and leverage a lot of their infrastructure, but know that there's a transition that they have to make to go from transaction printing to commercial print. Some already do that today. There are big customers who do that, but not all. But many don't. So that's an area, I think, of exactly what you're speaking about.
We have got a few questions from some of our audience here. We have Thijs Beekman. He's asking, he's been patient because it's a while ago he asked. He writes here, it's not clear for me or the substrates for the Kodak Versamark has to be specialized for the machine, or are the most paper substrates suitable? I mean, the Versamark is not produced anymore, is it?
Correct. Our Versamark product line is our product line really that was focused on transaction, and the substrates that were out there were really many of the uncoated substrates for the transaction print.
Yeah. So when you mentioned that, it was more an example of the challenges at the time, because it was like a completely new market. We also have David Pumati, and he has been chasing me to ask you this question, so I better do that. So he's asking, how do you see inline pre-coating priming? Do you see it like a plus towards competitors who are orientated to develop special inks? Clear, I'm referring to the use of offset papers.
Yeah, so our philosophy and our strategy has been to go after the market to increase the substrate range with pre-coats, and there's a couple reasons for that, but the primary reason is the pre-coat solutions that we apply are very, very inexpensive, and we're trying to drive, we continue to try to drive the cost of our ink sets down, and so if we can generate an ink that can be used in multiple applications, across packaging, across commercial print, the only thing that changes is a low-cost pre-coat. And so therefore we can drive scale of our ink manufacturing to drive costs down, and we don't have to put in expensive things like polymers and additives to make these special inks. And what we're seeing in the market is some of those inks work well on a few of the coated substrates, but they're still not broad enough to work on all the substrates. And so our pre-coating solutions enable us to print on a very wide variety of substrates, but do it with our at an inexpensive cost and within our low-cost inks that we manufacture, or low-priced inks.
We've got another question here, is remaining anonymous. Since commercial printers don't like roll-fed inkjet much, when do you see sheet-fed inkjet going more mainstream?
I think, starting to come now. I think there's some challenges with cut sheet that we're all learning in the inkjet space. Number one is, you're handling wet sheets of paper. So paper control is difficult. If you're going to do pre-coating on cut sheet, that's another challenge. It's easier to do your pre-coating on webs. But what we're seeing, I think, in the market today is low-end type of cut sheet devices in those transactional spaces to look at replacing some of the toner machines, but we're also starting to see more into the packaging side of sheet fed, as we talked about B1 presses. There's been a couple of formidable press manufacturers out there that have started to get into that market as well, and we're talking to partners in those spaces as well. So I think it's certainly not it's not growing as fast as we're seeing the roll fed markets. But I do think in the next 5 years or 3 to 5 years, we'll see a lot more entry into the cut sheet inkjet space.
When the Canon IX3200 was introduced in Europe, I had a chat with the guys from Venlo, and one of my first questions was actually that, okay, it's a B3 format. I mean, everybody's talking about bigger sheet sizes because that is what we are used to in the offset world. And I think that Heiko van Gaal, he actually said something that was quite interesting to me, because maybe that the bigger sheet size to some extent is a legacy from the offset presses. Because if you have, you have a lot of advantages having a smaller sheet size compared to what you just said. You have better handling, better pre-treating, better registration, and you can basically get things through the machines much faster. So that puts a lot of the stress on both the speed of the machine, but also the stress on the binding equipment afterwards. So do you think that could be a trend we see, that, okay, we have to get used to that we don't have the bigger sheet sizes, because it's quite unusual to have a bound product that is bigger than an A3, for example?
Yeah, it's, we've had some of those discussions internally as well as to the sheet size. It's hard for me to really predict which direction it goes. I do know, or have learned through the years, that the customers typically don't like to change their workflow. So again, when you get customers who are sheet fed, they stay sheet fed. They don't want to go to roll, or vice versa. I think that one of the dynamics will have to play out, Morten, and I think it'll be part of it'll be what will we see is will these people who are used to B1 presses be willing to go down in size based on the way they do their current workflow today and migrate to digital. with shorter run lengths that are coming in, it does make sense that you can go to a smaller sheet as well, right? Because you don't need the high volumes when you're doing, sticks 8, 10, or however many up that you have to now stamp out, in the finishing. So it does make some sense to go smaller. We're certainly having some of those debates internally right now.
Another thing I can't help thinking about is also, I'm sorry, it's just because another thing that we have been talking to some people around here at the sessions today was also, because I mean, we have a quite wide gamut when we talk about inkjet devices today, but that doesn't solve the thing that people also sometimes request special colors, fluorescent colors, metal colors, Pantone colors, and like that. Do you think that inkjet will also be able to move into have exchangeable colors in an easier way than today?
I think some of the technologies that are out there with inkjet will lend themselves to having those colors that can be interchangeable more easily than other technologies. Certainly, as you move into packaging, you need to have the extended color gamuts, and everybody, the kind of the holy grail is white, right? That we keep hearing about. Everybody's going to.
We heard about that all day.
Yeah.
So white, and so I think that I think it's coming in time in the developments. If that's what the customers need, I think the technologists will come up with the ways to get there. Right, over some period of time. And I think the customers need that and they want that. So I certainly think it'll be available. I don't know prediction of when, but people are already working on on those types of things. When you look at wide format, the number of colors in some of the wide format presses is pretty staggering. I think 10, 12 colors to get all the range. So it's pretty impressive what they've done there. And I think you could see some of that following into the other markets and applications in sheet fed or wool fed as well.
So if your customers want white, we need them to all start putting just quickly typing us messages, because then you'll be in the lab tonight, sitting there, continuing your white development, correct?
Yes. Yes.
On from customers.
I once heard, I've been worked in a printing company some years ago, and I remember when I was at a presentation where people were asking about printing white on black paper. And there was a printer actually in that audience said, we just do it the opposite. We take white paper and print black on it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, just a little anecdote.
We're doing that in packaging. We're putting down white flexo and being able to print over the top of it with color, right? That's the way to solve the challenge that we have.
Precisely. Randy Vandagriff, I think it's been a wonderful session. I just think that times fly by so fast. So I just want to thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your time here, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people enjoyed the session as well. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting me and having me on your webinar. And again, I apologize for the late start and getting the technology set up, but I really enjoyed it and look forward to future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Randy.
Take care.